I want to jump into something. I want to pitch something to you, Steve. I'm going to disagree with you on the state of the economy, and I want to hear your thoughts, okay? I want to pitch you a bigger short. And my assistant here is going to pull up a little display.
I'm getting nervous.
This is the bigger short.
Okay. This is
Jenga blocks.
Got it. Okay.
You smell that?
Opportunity?
No, idiot. Content. We're going to make some content.
Okay.
Okay. So this is all deposits at U.S. banks. Okay. You'll notice after COVID, with all the stimulus, there's a surge of new money in U.S. banks that they have to do something with. Some of them do the quote unquote safe option and they put it all into U.S. treasuries long term, like Silicon Valley Bank.
That didn't turn out so well.
Didn't turn out so well. They collapsed. Okay. When people try to withdraw, they can't sell the long term treasuries. They have a liquidity challenge. The stock goes to zero. It's a collapse. They have to be bailed out or at least bought by someone else. But other banks decide all this new money is prime for lending. They have to lend.
Yes.
They'll lend more than ever. So they might have to relax their lending standards in things like auto loans, credit card loans, home equity loans, HELOCs, and then business loans and CRE, commercial real estate.
Nice chart you got there. Very professional.
Very well put together.
Yeah.
So they're extending their loans above and beyond what they were doing before.
Yep. All true.
This Jenga block tower here represents all of these different loans. This is credit cards and auto and CRE. This is like the loan book of a major U.S. bank.
Okay.
And again, this tracks for Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, all the big ones.
Yes.
Okay?
I'm waiting for get to the point.
I'm sure you'll have an answer, but I just want to explain. So
and those are non-performing loans.
Non-performing loans. So around 23 Q1, the number of loans that are non-performing, AKA people not paying them back in default, starts to rise very, very quickly. And then right around 24 Q2, it levels off.
Right.
And people say, it's okay. Okay. The losses
All
are
good.
contained. They're contained, as you might say.
I heard that.
They're contained. And this is true. Again, this chart is the same at all these major banks for all these major classes, credit card, auto.
No question about it.
Okay. So what I noticed, well, actually, you know what? This data comes from Bill Moreland at Bank Reg Data, and I want to say it's his work, okay?
Why am I on the presentation?
You're in the presentation because
nice sunglasses, by the way.
Why do you have an IKEA shirt? They don't sell merchandise.
That's me in Taiwan in like 2016.
Oh, okay.
So as these default rates start to rise, the banks are going to the people that took out these loans and they're saying, hey, if you can't pay your $10,000 monthly payment for, let's say, a commercial real estate building, we're going to modify that payment. And you can pay $6,000.
Otherwise called extend and
pretend. Extend and pretend. So they start to be doing this extend and pretend strategy for not only CRE, but for auto and credit and a lot of things. So this is
harder to do that for credit and auto because you have they're securitized and the securitization documents are restrictive on what you can do.
I'm 100% sure you're correct and that I don't know.
Well, go ahead. Keep going.
So this is for, we'll focus on CRE.
Counterpoint, it says that on the graph right there. So I don't know, Steve.
This graph is not made up by Doug. This is non-performing loans modified. So this is how they track that they have done this.
Yes.
They basically.
Right.
And
all true.
Yeah, okay. So
I'm still waiting for the punchline.
Okay, well, here's the punchline. So around the time that you see that number go flat is when they are actually modifying loans to hide the rising default rate.
Yes, they are.
Okay? So you can see here, like, they track very closely. So the default rate should be rising, but instead they are giving people more and more modified loans. But at least we can track that. If you're an analyst for a bank and you're looking at their stock, you can see, hey, non-owner-occupied modified is growing. So at least we know what's going on. And
is your argument that CRE is going to sink the economy?
No, but the combination of CRE, credit, auto, and all of these might be bigger than people think.
Okay.
So as delinquency rises, modification also rises. But then in July 2025, a new rule came out that is making it even harder to track. Now, this was pressured by the banks on the regulators to...
Wait. The banks are pressuring regulators? I never heard that.
Never heard that.
Never heard that.
I don't know if this sounds familiar to you.
This is when your story starts to fall apart.
Okay. The institutions now only report loans as modified
if
for the first 12 months they are paying modified. So I have a perfect chart here. This is them pressuring.
Oh, no. So in other words, if you modify for the next 12 months, you classify it as modified, and then it goes back to non-modified.
And then it goes back to, so for example,
that's good.
Aiden goes in January. He makes his $6,000 lower payment. He does it in February. He does it in June. He does it all around the year. And then by December, even though he is not back to paying the original $10,000, it is now classified as a performing loan again. It goes back on the books as green.
I'm with you. I got one caveat,
Okay.
which is the big loan growth in the United States over
Yeah.
the last 10 years has not happened in the banks.
Okay.
It's happened outside the banks.
I agree with you, but some of these entities that are outside of the banks seem to be tied back into the banks. Like,
The banks lend to them,
yeah.
but they don't make the loans that those guys make.
But if those guys fail and the banks lend to them.
Yeah, it's a problem.
So here is from 2009. This is TDR, which I believe is troubled debt restructuring.
Right.
This is basically modified loans.
Right.
In 2009, if a bank had 0% modified loans, they failed at basically an 8% rate. However, if they had above 5% troubled debt restructuring, if they were doing a lot of loan modifications, they were addicted to it,
Right.
they failed at nearly at 42%, nearly a half the banks
That's higher.
were failing if they did a lot, if they got addicted to loan
I'm
modification.
so glad I'm on a show where guys know math so well.
This is their 3-year disappearing
I'm still waiting for the punchline.
We're getting there, okay? So if banks above 5% troubled debt restructuring failed at nearly half in 2009, and nowadays you look at all the major banks for all of their major loan portfolios, credit, auto, CRE, and they're approaching 8 or 9% TDR. They're modifying their loans at really high rates. And
That's just CRE.
this is just CRE, but I have I don't got 14 graphs, but these graphs, I promise you, they track for Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan.
Okay.
Okay. I'm
Calm down.
Okay. Finally.
More people need to tell me that. More people need to tell me that.
First of all,
Steve, okay.
the guys who I talk to,
Okay.
the bank guys,
Sure.
believe me, we pour over all this stuff every quarter.
Okay.
Like, when these banks report, the amount of disclosure is astonishing.
Yeah.
It's not like it's hidden. You go through JP Morgan's deck, you know what's going on.
Okay.
I mean, it might take you a couple of hours to go through JP Morgan's deck, but you know what's going on. I mean, first of all, they're much better capitalized than they were. They have much higher reserve levels than they did. So I actually don't worry so much about what you're talking about.
Okay.
What I worry more about is what I don't know, which is that most of the loan, all this you're saying are true. If that was coupled with massive loan growth at the same time, then I'd really be worried.
Okay.
Because those numbers would actually be understated. It takes time for losses to show up.
Yeah.
So if the number is like you're worried, it's 7%.
Yeah.
But let's say you're talking about a bank that's growing its loan book by 20% per year. It's really not 7% because the denominator is growing so
Sure.
rapidly. So what you would do to really understand is you would take the same numerator, but you wouldn't divide it by the current size of the loan book. You might divide it by the size of the loan book a year ago.
Okay.
You follow?
Yeah.
Because the losses that are happening now are not from the loans that you just made in the last year. But there hasn't been very little loan growth in the banks in 10 years.
I think that's fair. I guess I'm just
What
worried. Yeah,
I would
okay.
be, if I were you.
Yeah. I want to dig further. What would I do next?
If I could,
Yeah.
I would try and understand what's been happening in Blackstone and Apollo and all those places. That's where the big loan growth has been.
Okay.
And the problem is that they all do it privately, so we don't know. So
Yeah.
the guys that I talk to and really respect, who have been covering financial services for as long as I have, that's what we worry about.
Is
We worry about
private
the
equity?
big growth is in private equity, private lending, and we don't know what the hell's going on there.
There's no stress
And
test there.
There's
There's no-
nothing.
okay.
It's a black box.
Okay.
So if tomorrow it blows up, someone's going to say, told you so.
Right.
But the difference between now versus what I did back then was securitizations report data every month. Literally every single credit statistic in a securitization is reported every single month. So when you were looking at subprime loans in 2007, every month in the middle of the month, the data come out and you'd look and say, still bad.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that in the private side. All you have is anecdotes. So my feeling is the difference between what happened back then versus now
Yeah.
is because subprime was so big, it got to be like 500, 600 billion subprime mortgage loans per year. It was 20% of the housing market. And the underwriting was so bad. You had losses before the economy got bad. The normal cause and effect is you have an economy, starts to go into recession, people start to lose jobs, and then you get bad credit quality.
Right.
And then the Fed cuts rates, we go into recession, eventually we come out of it.
Right.
What was different about the subprime crisis of 2007 and 8 was bad credit created the recession, as opposed to the recession creating bad credit.
That makes sense.
As far as I can tell, whatever you're talking about here or whatever is happening in the private world is not going to cause the recession, whenever that recession will be.
Sure.
What I think will happen is there'll be a recession one day, and then we'll find out who did bad crap. but it's not going to. What you're arguing?
I think that's
you're making an argument that basically all this stuff is going to create a recession, and I don't think that's true.
I think that's a fair pushback. But I am just saying that it's from the outside, it's a little spooky to see that this number is rising, but we will, after, again, second quarter of this year, that number could be rising still, and we will not know about it because of the way this Ferris
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it's going to cause a recession.
Okay.
Now, if we have a trade war with China, we're going to have a recession, and then all this stuff will unwind.
Yes. But again, your example you just mentioned about things unwinding before we even have a recession, Tricolor and First Brand groups.
Yes, Tricolor.
They both are failing after.
Well, Tricolor might be just a fraud.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And a complete fraud.
But are they the only one? Is it contained to just Tricolor, or are people?
Oh, no. I mean, you had, I don't know if you saw CarMax had terrible numbers last week.
Carvana has great numbers somehow every time.
What does? Carvana. Yeah, every time.
Every time somehow. I don't know.
I don't know how it's done. But I know a bunch of people who are a lot older today because they were short Carvana.
Dude, I lost a little bit. I'm stupid. I don't know.
But CarMax tells you that the consumer's got issues.
That's all.
I agree.
Yeah,
with.
okay. All right.
I agree. The consumer has issues.
Maybe stepping away from the idea that this is all heading towards or going to cause a recession, just the mechanics of what he was explaining. Because when you brought this up the first time, my initial reaction to the pressure on the regulators to basically relabel the loans after like a year of the reduced payments, but the reduced payments get to continue after the fact. My first reaction is, why is that allowed? Why is that okay? Like,
well, you got to have a rule.
I mean, but the rule doesn't make any sense. The rule isn't doing anything of value anymore if you allow it to like go.
Listen, compared to what used to exist, that's like nothing.
Yeah, but that does feel like a terrible
I understand
bar.
what you're saying. It's not a great rule.
Yeah.
But compared to what I was used to, it's like a cookie.
But I was watching cartoons in the 2008.
I understand.
This is great though, hearing that our perspective, we just need to broaden it to the apocalypse.
Like you're like worried about like, this is terrible. This is terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, what used to
get way more
exist,
terrible.
it's like it's not even the same universe.
Well, you mentioned a lot of the lending growing in private businesses, like or private equity.
Right.
I hate to be a pessimist about that, but what do you think is kind of the worst version of what you could imagine going on versus
the worst? I'll give you the worst.
Yeah,
I'll give you the scenario that someone would argue is horrendous. I don't know if it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
So years ago, Apollo bought an insurance company, a life insurance company. And there are people who argue that what Apollo has done is take a boring life insurance company that takes its premiums and invests in boring stuff, and they've loaded it up with private equity and other crap.
Yeah.
And that one day, the whole life insurance sector will blow up. Now, I don't think that's probably true.
Okay.
But that's one version of what some arguments people make.
And then regardless of the extent of how bad it is, what may or may not be going on behind closed doors, you think all of that comes to light in like whatever crisis unfolds in the future.
Whatever,
if there's some sort of recession,
if there's a recession,
what
does Warren Buffett say? When the tide goes out, you find out who's naked. He said that, not me. And it's true. It always happens like that.
I'm just wondering if it's like a nudist pool. I feel like it just feels like a lot of these things are more naked than they seem.
Well, we'll find out.
We'll find out. I want to ask that, yeah.